An 18-year-old girl sits alone in an airplane cockpit, 30,000 feet above the ground, with no pilot training and both crew members unconscious behind her. Every second that passes brings her closer to a disaster that could kill everyone on board. What she does next will shock the entire world and change aviation history forever. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. And please like and subscribe for more videos like this. Jessica Martinez never imagined that her spring break flight from Miami to Boston would become the most terrifying experience of her life. She was just an ordinary college freshman studying biology at a small university, excited to visit her grandmother for the holidays. She had flown many times before, always feeling safe, always trusting that the pilots knew exactly what they were doing. This flight was supposed to be simple, routine, just another 2 hours in the air. She checked in early that morning, went through security without any issues, and boarded the small regional jet with only 42 other passengers. The aircraft was older but well maintained, and the crew seemed professional and friendly. Jessica found her seat near the middle of the plane, buckled in, and pulled out her book. She was reading a thriller about a detective solving impossible cases, never knowing she was about to live through something far more intense than any fiction. The plane took off smoothly, climbing through the clouds into bright blue sky. Everything felt normal, peaceful even. The flight attendant came by with drinks and snacks. Passengers chatted quietly or slept, and the hum of the engines provided a steady background noise. Jessica sipped her juice and turned the pages of her book, completely unaware that within the next hour, her life would depend on skills she did not even know she had. 40 minutes into the flight, something changed. Jessica noticed the plane starting to tilt slightly to the left, not dramatically, but enough to make her look up from her book. Other passengers began to notice too, shifting in their seats, glancing toward the windows. The seatbelt sign was still off, and nobody seemed alarmed yet. But there was a subtle feeling of unease spreading through the cabin. Then the intercom crackled to life, but instead of the captain's voice, there was only silence, then a strange bumping sound, then nothing. The flight attendant, a woman named Carol who had worked for the airline for 15 years, immediately stood up and walked quickly toward the cockpit. Jessica watched her knock on the door, wait, knock again, then use her key to open it. What happened next made Jessica's blood run cold. Carol screamed, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the calm atmosphere like a knife. Passengers jumped in their seats, some standing up to see what was wrong. Carol stumbled backward out of the cockpit, her face pale, her hands shaking. She looked around the cabin with wild, panicked eyes and shouted words that nobody wanted to hear. Both pilots are unconscious. They are not responding. We need help. The cabin erupted in chaos. People started shouting, crying, pulling out their phones even though there was no signal at this altitude. Some passengers unbuckled and rushed toward the front, demanding answers, demanding solutions. Carol tried to calm everyone down, but her own panic was obvious. She kept looking back at the cockpit, then at the passengers, clearly searching for someone, anyone, who could help. She asked a question that would change everything. Does anyone here know how to fly a plane? Silence fell over the cabin, heavy and suffocating. 42 passengers, and not one of them was a pilot. Not one of them had any training. Not one of them could save the aircraft that was now flying on autopilot with no conscious crew. Jessica felt her heart pounding in her chest, her mind racing. She was terrified, just like everyone else, but something inside her refused to accept that this was how things would end. She thought about her grandmother waiting for her in Boston, about her parents back home who had no idea their daughter was in danger, about all the people on this plane who deserved to live. She stood up, her legs shaking, her voice barely a whisper at first. I have played flight simulators. I do not know if that helps, but I have played them a lot. Carol turned to her, eyes wide with desperate hope mixed with doubt. Jessica was just a kid, barely an adult, with no real experience. But there was nobody else. Absolutely nobody else. Jessica walked to the cockpit, her hands trembling, her breathing shallow. When she stepped inside, the sight made her stomach twist. The captain was slumped forward against the controls. The co-pilot collapsed in his seat, both completely unresponsive. She could see they were still breathing, but they were deeply unconscious, likely from some kind of sudden medical emergency, possibly carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty ventilation system, though nobody would know for sure until later. The cockpit was a maze of switches, buttons, screens, and levers, far more complex than anything she had seen in her simulator games at home. The autopilot was engaged, keeping the plane level for now, but Jessica knew that would not last forever. They needed to land, and soon, but she had no idea how. Carol stood behind her, phone pressed to her ear, desperately trying to reach air traffic control on the emergency frequency. After what felt like an eternity, she got through. A controller named David, working at the Boston Air Route Traffic Control Center, answered. His voice was calm, trained for emergencies, but even he could not hide the shock when Carol explained the situation. We have an 18-year-old passenger in the cockpit. Both pilots are unconscious. She has some simulator experience, but no real training. We need help immediately. David did not waste time. He immediately contacted a senior pilot instructor named Captain Richard Hayes, who was on the ground at Boston Logan Airport. Richard had 30 years of flying experience, thousands of hours in the cockpit, and had trained countless pilots. But he had never trained someone over the radio, never talked a complete beginner through landing a plane in a real emergency. He took a deep breath and spoke clearly into his headset. Jessica, my name is Richard. I am a pilot, and I am going to help you land this airplane safely. You need to listen very carefully to everything I say. Can you do that? Jessica's voice cracked as she answered, I will try. I am really scared. Richard's voice remained steady, reassuring. I know you were scared. That is completely normal, but I need you to focus. You can do this. We are going to take it one step at a time. The next 30 minutes were the most intense of Jessica's life. Richard guided her through every single action. First, he had her check the autopilot settings, making sure the plane was maintaining altitude and heading. Then, he explained how to use the radio to communicate directly with him, cutting out the intermediate steps. He taught her how to read the altimeter, the airspeed indicator, the heading compass. Each instruction was simple, broken down into the smallest possible steps, but there were so many systems, so many things that could go wrong. Jessica's hands were slick with sweat as she touched the controls, terrified of making a mistake that could doom everyone on board. The hardest part was still ahead, landing. Richard explained that he would guide her through every moment, but she would have to physically control the plane during the descent and touchdown. The autopilot could help with some of it, but the final approach required human hands on the controls. Jessica felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to his instructions. She thought about all the passengers behind her, families with children, elderly people, young professionals, all of them depending on her. She thought about Carol, who had stayed by her side the entire time, offering encouragement, holding her shoulder when her hands shook too much. She thought about her own family, and she made a decision. She would not give up. She would not let fear win. Richard walked her through the descent process step by step. Reduce throttle slightly. Adjust the angle of descent. Watch your airspeed. Keep it steady. Jessica followed every instruction with intense concentration, her eyes darting between the instruments and the windscreen, where the ground was getting closer and closer. The airport came into view, a sprawling complex of runways and buildings. Emergency vehicles were already positioned along the runway, fire trucks and ambulances waiting for the worst. Richard's voice remained calm, but Jessica could hear the tension underneath. "You are doing great, Jessica. Now I need you to line up with the runway. Use the controls gently, very gently. Small adjustments." The plane wobbled as she touched the yoke, overcorrecting at first, then finding a steadier hand. Richard talked her through trimming the aircraft, adjusting flaps, preparing for landing. The runway grew larger in the windscreen, the ground rushing up to meet them. Jessica's entire body was tense, every muscle locked in concentration. Richard's voice filled her ears. "Ease back on the throttle. Let the nose come up slightly. You are almost there. Keep it steady." The wheels touched the runway with a hard bump, not perfect, but down. The plane bounced once, then settled, rolling forward. Jessica's hands were frozen on the controls, her mind blank with shock. Richard's voice broke through. "Brakes, Jessica. Apply the brakes gently." She pressed the pedals, feeling the plane slow, 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 until finally it came to a complete stop in the middle of the runway. For a moment, there was total silence in the cockpit. Then the cabin behind her exploded in cheers, crying, shouting. Passengers hugged each other. Carol collapsed against the wall, sobbing with relief. Jessica sat frozen in the pilot's seat, unable to move, unable to process what had just happened. Emergency crews rushed to the plane within seconds. Paramedics entered the cockpit and began treating the unconscious pilots, who were quickly stabilized and taken to the hospital. Investigators later determined that a faulty valve had leaked odorless gas into the cockpit ventilation system, causing both pilots to lose consciousness almost simultaneously. It was a rare mechanical failure, 1 in a million, but it had happened. Jessica was helped out of the cockpit by paramedics, her legs barely able to support her weight. As she stepped into the cabin, every single passenger stood and applauded, some crying, some reaching out to touch her hand, to thank her. She had saved 42 lives, including her own, with nothing but courage and the calm voice of a pilot she had never met. The story spread across the world within hours. News outlets everywhere ran the headline about the 18-year-old girl who landed a plane with no training. Richard Hayes was interviewed on national television, praising Jessica's composure and bravery. Aviation experts called it a miracle, a 1 in a million event where everything that could have gone right did. Jessica became an overnight sensation, but she did not want fame. She just wanted to see her grandmother, to hug her parents, to return to some sense of normal life. But normal was no longer possible. She received letters from thousands of people thanking her, calling her a hero. Airlines offered her free flights for life. Flight schools offered her scholarships to become a real pilot. And through it all, Jessica remained humble, insisting she was just a scared girl who did what anyone would have done. But that was not true. Not everyone could have done what she did. Most people would have frozen, panicked, given up. Jessica chose to fight. She chose to trust a stranger's voice on the radio and to believe in herself when nobody else could. Her story became a symbol of human resilience, of the power of remaining calm under unimaginable pressure, of the incredible things ordinary people can do when faced with extraordinary circumstances. Jessica eventually did become a pilot, earning her license 2 years later and dedicating her life to aviation safety. She worked with engineers to improve cockpit ventilation systems and with airlines to develop better emergency protocols. She never forgot that day, the day she faced death in the cockpit and refused to let it win. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe for more videos like this.